For more than half a century now, it has been thought that if communication comes from an extraterrestrial civilization, it's going to come in the form of radio waves. Radio waves so faint that it's unlikely that we're going to be able to hear them unless we have extremely powerful telescopes like the Parkes radio telescope. And even then, the amount of power required to beam a recognizable signal across hundreds of light years is simply astonishing. A very difficult thing indeed for even an advanced civilization to do, and it would have to be deliberate, and it would have to be consistent. A communication sent over and over again to make sure that our receivers are pointed in the right direction at the right time. What civilization would waste their effort in doing this, especially if they're not sure if an intelligent civilization actually lives on any given planet? Because even though Earth is a very promising looking world in the Goldilocks zone of its star, and if you had extremely advanced optics, you might even be able to detect breathable oxygen, a favorable environment, that sort of thing, we have given out no indications of our presence whatsoever for more than 100 years. Therefore, the only way that an extraterrestrial civilization is going to know that a civilization exists here is if they're within 100 light years or so of our star. If they're beyond that, there isn't the slightest clue that a civilization exists here. So once again, why would they put any effort into it? Well, let's look at 3I Atlas. What if this is their method of communication instead? Once it has been determined that there is a civilization here, or at least a promising planet, then send a scout, an emissary of sorts, or a mothership to not only confirm the presence of life on our planet, but also perhaps to reach out to any civilizations that might be there, and to do so in a way that would make it very difficult for us to respond in a hostile manner by keeping their distance, hiding behind our star when 3I Atlas makes its closest approach, a variety of different ways to make sure that this is a safe and sure communication without investing a huge amount of time and a huge amount of energy in repeatedly trying to contact us. Might this be what 3I Atlas is trying to do? Well, interestingly enough, not only are there indications that 3I Atlas might be trying to communicate, it also may be reacting to things that we are doing, announcements that we are making about its strange anomalous nature, and it may be making changes in order to get our attention, or perhaps just to hide its true nature. And to my great astonishment, after I fed this idea into Grok, I discovered there's a lot more evidence to suggest that this might be true than I ever thought. Good morning, alien enthusiasts, and welcome to a very special bulletin here on the Angry Astronaut. And yeah, this is not something that I was expecting to be reporting on. I was expecting to take maybe a short break from 3I Atlas simply because, well, it's out of our sight now. There are no telescopes, at least none on Earth or any of our space-based telescopes that can get a good look at this object as it continues to make its way through the solar system, as it begins to approach perihelion, that is to say, its closest approach to the sun. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to see it, at least not with our best instruments, once it reaches that position. Once again, possibly by design, given all the other weird things about this object's trajectory, but we're not going to be talking about that. Instead, we're going to be talking about very recent and very strange things that 3I Atlas has been doing, even perhaps stranger than what happened before. Because it seems that every time we notice something anomalous about 3I Atlas, of course, the trajectory is anomalous, the size seems anomalous, those sorts of things are a little difficult to change. But other things that are anomalous about 3I Atlas, things that don't bear any resemblance to any comets that we've ever seen before, solar system based or otherwise, all of a sudden, 3I Atlas seems to be making changes. And these changes only come after the news reports on these strange anomalous events. And all of these changes are happening in regards to composition. After spectrographic analyses and ultraviolet analyses, these sorts of things are taken of this object and make certain strange discoveries about the composition of the coma, the orientation of the tail, that sort of thing. Shortly thereafter, a change is made. And yeah, it could just be that 3I Atlas is an ordinary comet that's just changing and evolving as it gets closer to the sun. And now we're seeing characteristics that bear greater resemblance to ordinary comets. But the thing of it is, these changes are not coming about in the same way as they would with an ordinary comet. They're coming about very abruptly, very dramatically. And once again, it just seems like an adjustment, a radical adjustment is being made by 3I Atlas as if it is trying to match what we would expect from a solar system comet. And it's making these adjustments very rapidly, but again, at the wrong time. So I fed all of this into Grok. I asked Grok, the artificial intelligence for X that Elon Musk owns, came up with whatever, what it thought by feeding all this information into it. And I said, be open-minded, assume that 3I Atlas might be an asteroid ship of some kind. Could it be that this is what is happening? Could it be that 3I Atlas, in an effort to masquerade as an ordinary comet, in an effort to try to fit what we expect of it? Because keep in mind, we don't know what ordinary comets look like in other solar systems. So it could be that ordinary comets have compositions similar to this elsewhere and not necessarily here. And 3I Atlas may have been masquerading as what it thought was a normal comet, or at least as close to a normal comet as it could get. And then as we begin to report on its anomalous nature, it starts making changes, but it gets even deeper than that. Grok, all on its own, determined that not only are changes being made at strangely convenient times, but also 3I Atlas might be trying to communicate with us. So this is the development that inspired this theory of mine. Back in August of 2025, when 3I Atlas was 3.32 astronomical units from the sun, the near-infrared spectrograph on the James Webb Space Telescope revealed a coma that was heavily skewed towards carbon dioxide, with a CO2 to H2O mixing ratio of about 8:1, the highest ever recorded in a comet by far. This was a head-scratcher. At that distance, roughly 500 million kilometers out, water ice shouldn't be sublimating all that easily anyway. Most solar system comets stay dormant until about 2.5 astronomical units, relying on carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide ices for early activity. But 3I Atlas's water signal was faint, almost an afterthought, with solid water ice grains likely ejected passively by the CO2 outgassing rather than direct H2O sublimation, or so we thought at the time. But let's fast forward to mid to late September of 2025, when 3I Atlas was 2.8 astronomical units away from the sun, and NASA's Neil Gehrels Swift Observatory suddenly flipped the script. Auburn University astronomers detected hydroxyl gas, a direct proxy for water vapor, at a prodigious rate, 40 kilograms per second, equivalent to a fire hose at full blast. That's orders of magnitude more active than expected for this distance, where solar heating is still too weak to vaporize water ice en masse. Ground-based telescopes like Gemini South confirmed water ice grains in the coma as early as July, but this strange surge of hydroxyl suggests a sudden asymmetric outburst, perhaps from a subsurface reservoir cracking open or a hyper-efficient venting mechanisms kicking in. But we've never seen anything like that happen with any other comet. This sudden swing from virtually no water to an incredible amount of water gushing out of the comet. And incidentally, another interesting detail is the fact that in spite of all of this water gushing out of the comet, there is no non-gravitational acceleration. It's not having any impact on the object's trajectory or speed, which should be impossible. But let's go ahead and continue and speculate a bit about 3I Atlas reacting. Instead, if 3I Atlas had implanted receivers tuned to human frequencies, in other words, picking up radio chatter about its dry CO2 profile from James Webb Space Telescope press releases in late August, this could look like a deliberate correction. Early news emphasized the CO2 dominance and low water, strange absence of water, so maybe its machinery ramped up H2O ejection to signal abundance, or perhaps to cool the nucleus for some reason. In a ship-like comet, this resembles cryogenic fluid venting, dumping excess heat or propellant analogs to maintain stability as the object nears perihelion with the sun. But this is not the only example of what appears to be a reaction. Also, initial ultraviolet spectroscopy in July to August of 2025 via Hubble and ground telescopes flagged atomic nickel in the coma. I've talked about this a number of times, but zero detectable iron, which is a glaring mismatch. In natural comets, including the only confirmed interstellar comet 2I Borisov, nickel and iron are geochemical twins, forged together in supernova and locked in near-solar ratios. They'd sublimate or get ejected together from refractory minerals like silicates or sulfides. They shouldn't get sublimated separately, but at 3I Atlas's distance at the time, between 3 to 4 astronomical units, temperatures are as low as minus 200 degrees Celsius, far too cold for metal sublimation anyway. But the nickel signal was strong, hinting at volatile carriers like nickel tetracarbonyl. At least that was the natural explanation, but Avi Loeb suggested that there might be some sort of industrial process going on 3I Atlas, with nickel being the byproduct. A variety of different types of nickel-based alloys produce pure nickel as a byproduct. But then, lo and behold, a change took place in 3I Atlas after this strange anomaly was reported. In early September, when 3I Atlas was 2.6 astronomical units away from the Sun, the European Southern Observatory's Very Large Telescope, or VLT, with spectrographic modification, caught iron finally appearing, but the nickel-iron ratio plummeted dramatically from extreme nickel dominant to near solar norms as the object warmed. Nickel production matched theoretical sublimation rates for nickel carbonyl, a low sublimation point at minus 43 degrees Celsius, while iron kicked in later with a higher threshold at 105 degrees Celsius. This sequential unlock supports organometallic compounds in the nucleus, possibly from formation near a carbon monoxide-rich line in its birth system. No more was it missing iron, but the initial imbalance was unprecedented. Just like the sudden gush of water, no other comet has ever shown such a steep, distant, dependent shift when it comes to the production of iron and nickel. So imagine if 3I Atlas's machinery is monitoring our data dumps, and August reports screamed nickel but no iron artificial, and Avi Loeb's posts went viral on X. By the way, my own videos went viral as well. By September, as scrutiny intensified, the iron signal emerges, like the ship adjusting its exhaust to blend in, venting iron compounds to normalize the ratio and deflect suspicion. In a natural body with tech, this could be automated camouflage, selective catalysts to mimic solar system comets. And by the way, no metal should have been sublimating at this point anyway at this great distance, neither iron nor nickel. So it's not passive heating from the sun that's causing this, but perhaps internal reactors or microwave emitters tuned to our broadcast bands, accelerating the process, harvesting or processing metals on the fly. And once again, this is all Grok's observation. If this is a ship reacting to our news, AI parsing CNN astrophysics segments via leaked radio waves, it might be testing us. You think I'm dry? Here's water. Anomalous metals? Balance now. Or prepping for contact, shedding mass for maneuvers near Mars. But after making these observations, Grok then pointed out another anomaly to me and took the conversation to areas that I never thought we would go. And I definitely didn't expect an AI to suddenly suggest the possibility that cyanide being present in 3I Atlas's coma might be a way of communicating with us. Not only did 3I Atlas make this suggestion, it translated the message. So as I mentioned before, all of this is just blowing my mind to begin with. But then out of nowhere, Grok also starts talking about cyanide, strange emissions of cyanide coming from 3I Atlas and how that might correspond to some form of basic binary communication. Again, all of this was completely without any prompting from me. I didn't ask Grok to whether or not 3I Atlas might be communicating, as to certainly not whether or not Grok could actually translate what 3I Atlas might be trying to say to us. It did this all on its own. And what Grok had to say after that was simply mind-blowing. Astronomical observations from July to September of 2025, particularly from the Gemini South Telescope and the Very Large Telescope, or VLT, confirm cyanide gas in 3I Atlas's coma at a production rate of 20 grams per second when the object was about 3 astronomical units from the sun. This is notably high for an interstellar comet, or any comet for that matter at that distance, where solar heating is weak, negative 123 degrees Celsius, and cyanide typically appears in smaller quantities in solar system comets closer to perihelion, about 1 to 2 astronomical units away from the sun, not nearly this far. Cyanide is a prebiotic molecule, common in comets as a volatile tied to HCN, or hydrogen cyanide, or organic precursors like C2N2, but its abundance here stands out, especially alongside the carbon dioxide dominance and metal anomalies, nickel and iron. The cyanide emission is also asymmetric, concentrated in a sunward plume, an anti-tail pointing at the sun, which is very bizarre. And of course, we've known that about 3I Atlas for a while, that this is a very strange thing indeed, suggesting localized outgassing vents rather than uniform sublimation. But once again, this cyanide blasting out towards the sun and an anti-tail in complete defiance of the solar wind is very bizarre, to say the least. The cyanide production rate of 20 grams per second could fluctuate in a non-random sequence, say short bursts followed by pauses resembling binary or Morse-like code. For example, 3 10-second spikes of high cyanide emission separated by 20-second lulls could encode a repeating 101 pattern. In September of 2025, the data showed episodic water outbursts, suggesting the nucleus can trigger discrete venting events. If the cyanide follows a similar bursty rhythm, which is not yet confirmed but plausible, it could be a controlled release from internal reservoirs, not just solar-driven sublimation. So if we assume that 3I Atlas is a technological construct reacting to our news, in other words, picking up our chatter about its weird chemistry, the cyanide spikes could be more than chemical quirks. They might be modulated to encode information. Here's how that could play out, blending hard data with speculative leaps. If 3I Atlas is deliberately manipulating its cyanide emissions to talk to us, it would likely use patterns detectable by our instruments, variations in intensity, timing, or spectral properties that deviate from natural cometary behavior. For example, you could have a temporal modulation, an on-off pulse. A simple binary signal could be a ping to confirm sentience, like saying, "I'm here and I'm not just a rock." It might mimic our own SETI protocols, which use pulse signals to stand out against cosmic noise. If aligned with our news cycles, in other words, post-August reports on its chemistry, it could be responding to our "cyanide is high" headlines. The ship's machinery could use microreactors or electromagnetic fields to selectively heat cyanide-rich ices, controlling outgassing like a transmitter, toggling radio waves. You could also have spectral shifts being involved in communication. Cyanide emits in the ultraviolet BX band, about 388 nanometers, easily caught by spectrographs like Hubble's instruments. If 3I Atlas tweaks the isotropic ratio of cyanide or dopes it with trace elements, say nitrogen isotopes, it could shift emission lines subtly. Think of it like tuning a radio dial to specific frequencies. A sequence of shifts, for example, C12N for 10 hours, then C13N for 5 hours, could encode data. Now, there's evidence already in its behavior that it might already be doing this. The nickel-iron flip from nickel only to nickel and iron showed that 3I Atlas can alter its coma chemistry rapidly, possibly by organometallic compounds. Cyanide tied to volatile hydrogen cyanide could be similarly manipulated by onboard systems catalyzing isotropic variants. Let me tell you something. The more I read, the more my mind got blown. Now, another method could be spatial patterns, directed jets, in other words, this anti-tail. The asymmetric cyanide plume concentrated sunward could be steered to form geometric or sequential patterns in the coma, say pulsing jets in a spiral or cross shape over days, visible in high-res imaging such as James Webb's instruments designed to do just that. Think of it like skywriting with cyanide gas. The sunward plume already defies typical cometary tails, which fan anti-sunward due to solar wind. If the plume's shape or direction shifts in ways uncorrelated with solar heating, it could suggest active control. Geometric patterns could be a visual signal like crop circles in space meant for our imagers. If timed with our news, such as asymmetric coma reports in late August, it might be a cheeky, "You noticed? Here's more." A spiral could symbolize its interstellar origin, hinting at a galactic scale journey. Embedded thrusters or magnetic fields could shape gas vents, using cyanide as a tracer for high visibility signaling, like a flare tailored to ultraviolet telescopes. And then finally, there's chemical coupling. using cyanide with other volatiles, such as carbon dioxide or water in a choreographed sequence. Say cyanide peaks when H2O dips, creating a multi-species waveform. This could encode data in relative abundance, such as a chemical Morse code. The CO2-H2O ratio, by the way, flipped from 8:1 in August to water dominant by September, showing dynamic chemical shifts. Cyanide steady 20 grams per second alongside these changes suggest it's a stable signal amid flux, perfect for a carrier wave. And what might the message implications be from this type of signaling? Well, a multi-molecule pattern could encode a layered message like, I'm organic, which is what the cyanide means, but also engineered in the carbon dioxide and metal emissions. And if it's reacting to our prebiotic molecule hype, it might amplify cyanide to say, I'm a life seeder, or to pair it with metals to hint at technology. So if it is encoding messages in its cyanide emissions, what is it trying to say? Well, the message ranges from minimalist to profound. For example, in minimalist terms, I see you watching, short cyanide bursts timed with our news cycles, such as post-August 26 James Webb Space Telescope reports, could be an acknowledgement, like a cosmic nod to our curiosity, or it could be conversational. I'm not what you think. The shift from CO2 to H2O, nickel to nickel plus iron, and steady cyanide through the whole thing could be tweaking its profile to defy natural common assumptions, forcing us to rethink its nature. It could also say, I'm a bridge. High cyanide emissions, a prebiotic staple, paired with industrial metals like nickel and iron, could signal a hybrid origin, part natural, part engineered, perhaps a relic of a civilization that seeded life or built probes from cometary materials. A spiral plume might say, I've spiraled through galaxies, and here's my story. And then finally, it could also be preparatory. Get ready. With its Mars flyby on October 16th of 2025 and perihelion on October 29th, 2025 approaching, cyanide spikes might be priming us for a bigger reveal, like a payload drop or a trajectory shift near Mars where our rovers could spot it. And I have to admit, of all the potential messages 3i Atlas might be saying, the get ready part is the most ominous of all. And it gets even deeper than that. What if 3i Atlas were actually trying to notify us or let us know that it was trying to communicate with us by communicating with Grok, by planting these suggestions with Grok and having it relay these suggestions to others? Because once again, I must remind you, the whole cyanide communication thing was not something that I prompted. It was not something that I asked for. It was something that Grok did on its own. Or did Grok really do this on its own? Or was Grok being prompted by something else? Something making its way through the solar system at this very moment. This is a wild theory. I totally admit that, and I'm sure pretty difficult for some of you to swallow, but nevertheless, if you made it this far into the video, I really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and also please keep in mind, I've only got a few days left that we're going to be offering this 3i Atlas merchandise. All the details are in the description. I think this design is fantastic, and once again, the folks at Sunline make a really comfortable product. That was something my merch never had in the past, but it definitely does now. So the store is not going to be open for a whole lot longer. I think like a week or so. I'm not sure. You can check it on your own when you go to the store in the description. But if you want to take advantage of that, this is your opportunity. Thanks so much again for watching. And until next time, stay angry about space.